right. Hey, Jori. So what's your role at Scopely?
I'm SVP of Product and Studio GM at Scopely. So basically what that boils down to is I spend most of my time thinking about how do we set up game teams to kind of scale and operate our live service businesses, and then how do we set up the next set of products to kind of have this evergreen potential of operating for the next 10 plus years.
Very cool. So I just read that you guys sounded like you had an amazing year, kind of exceeded 400 million revenue run rate, and also secured a new office space, which it sounded like you're doubling your footprint. What's the story behind that, and how many people are you planning to add over the next, I don't know, once you're going to move into the new space?
Yeah, it's been a really exciting year. So we very recently announced a new office space next year in Culver City,
right?
Yep, at the platform. So beautiful space, 60,000 square feet. Like you were mentioning, basically doubling our footprint.
Wow.
Currently, we are at around a little over 300 people across our LA headquarters and Barcelona, which is our European headquarters.
Right.
Around 250 here in LA and the rest in Barcelona. It's been an exciting period of growth. I mean, as you mentioned, we kind of blew past that $400 million run rate, towards the beginning of this year, and that's really off the back of both growing our live businesses. We have 4 live franchises we've been operating for multiple years, and 2 new games that we launched recently: Star Trek Fleet Command in the strategy category, and Looney Tunes World of Mayhem in the action RPG category.
How are those 2 games actually doing?
Really well, really well. Star Trek was the largest launch we've ever had, scaled to the largest run rate that we had already, which for us is really unusual. I mean, we try to operate games for the long run, and we're used to games scaling for very long periods of time. So to already kind of reach the run rate that it's at and have a lot of growth ahead of it's been really exciting. Interestingly, Looney Tunes launched just a couple weeks after Star Trek, and would have been our largest launch ever had we not launched Star Trek just a couple weeks earlier.
Okay, so. Wow, so it's going up.
Yeah, that's the trend, and that's why I think having a larger footprint to grow into is going to be really important for us.
How many people are you planning to add then?
I think rather than having a specific number in mind in terms of the people we're planning to add, the way that I would look at it is, how many franchises do we expect to have around over the long run? And with our model, the interesting thing is, we're not really looking at these games as having a finite life cycle, right? There's this kind of old concept of, you launch a game, you scale the game, it plateaus, then you harvest it, then it dies, you set it off into the sunset. We don't believe that kind of paradigm needs to exist, right? A game will decay if you're not investing in it, but as long as we're making the player experience better and keeping it relevant, keeping it a kind of delightful daily habit for our players, there's no reason why these games can't keep scaling over time. I mean, we've seen, Yahtzee, basically our Dice with Buddies, Yahtzee with Buddies franchise. I mean, we had our largest year ever last year, and it's our oldest 8-year-old franchise.
Yeah, I just saw the new Yahtzee, I think, just made it in the top 50 grossing this morning.
Yeah, it's pretty exciting. I mean, I think, like I was mentioning, the key has really been about how do we make the player experience really relevant, really kind of modern, really in touch with what our audience actually wants, and keep that experience fresh time after time after time. So with that game in particular, rather than bolting on a bunch of kind of crazy new features, we've actually really focused in on the core of the game, player experience, performance of the app, released new game modes that really resonate with people that like that kind of Yahtzee core dice experience, which isn't a revelation, right? It's kind of giving players what they're asking for, but it's really propelled the growth of the product over the last several months.
Great. Just coming back to the LO ecosystem, awesome, you're expanding. And it seems to me LA is becoming kind of the gaming hub, at least in the US, maybe even ahead of the Bay Area. Why do you think that is?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is a really exciting time for the LA ecosystem. LA has a really rich track record of, the entertainment space, of, major entertainment companies that have been based here, major IPs being developed here. But I think over the last several years, we've seen the technology industry really accelerate in Los Angeles. And when you get that kind of intersection of entertainment and technology, I mean, it's ripe for what we're trying to do, I think where the gaming ecosystem is going right now. I spent a long time in the Bay Area before moving down to LA to join Scopely 5 years ago. And to me, it really feels like Los Angeles has that buzz right now, that feeling of growth and opportunity that the Bay Area used to have, maybe a decade ago. Right. It was a really exciting time.
And the new people entering the gaming space, are those, from your perspective, mainly folks moving to LA from other regions? Are they getting into the space? Maybe they have a background in other entertainment or tech segments. What from your perspective, what's the mix?
Yeah, it's interesting. I'm seeing the funnel developing really from two different directions. On one hand, what I think is really exciting is we have a number of people that are used to making AAA entertainment experiences, whether that's console games or film industry, whatever it might be, but these really top-end premium experiences for audiences, and they finally feel like mobile and gaming, the current kind of free-to-play mobile gaming ecosystem is an ecosystem where they can put their skills to use. You look at the kind of quality production value of the games that are being built now, the experiences that are being offered. It's like we can finally have a good home where these people's talents are put to use effectively. Mm-hmm. And then on the flip side, we have folks coming from finance, consulting, a number of different kind of adjacent fields or other parts of the consumer tech industry that are like, wow, this is such an exciting, vibrant ecosystem. It's growing so quickly. You have access to almost infinite data. You can experiment. You can learn quickly. So people that may not have thought of gaming as a career for them, but had that kind of interest and passion, suddenly see it as an opportunity they can take advantage of.
Yeah, very cool. That's true, I guess, everywhere as well as in LA. So that's super exciting. So my understanding of your model is you secure kind of ideally an evergreen IP. Mm-hmm. Then you work with an external studio, external company, or potentially internal studio. And then you have your internal mobile publishing team / platform. Mm-hmm. What's the role of the external studio versus the publishing? Who focuses on what? Can you explain that a little bit more?
Yeah, so I think the easiest way to think about it is a hub and spoke type of model. So in the center of this ecosystem, we have the publishing platform, operations, technology. So this gives us our game service layer, our analytics platform, our segmentation technology, advertising, UA tech. That's all done centrally, and that's the area where we're really trying to leverage economies of scale and just kind of the advantages of having more data, more operating knowledge. Attached to that, we have these different spokes, which are our development studios. And what we look for in a development studio is a team that can be laser focused on making a phenomenal, durable, long-lasting game experience for our players. So generally we're working with studios that are really excited about making the best game in a specific category and building that game, building that franchise for years and years and years. The hub is really focused on just eliminating all the noise that would otherwise be blocking that developer from leaning in on it. There's a variety of business models in terms of how we work with these studios. You mentioned everything from studios that are part of Scopely to partners, but the important thing is that laser focus on building, operating, growing that game franchise and that category expertise.
So if you now look from a team perspective over the life cycle of a product, meaning, have a good idea about a new IP, and you're looking at the different studio to work with, kind of planning of the game towards then starting the development and getting towards the launch, and then to get into this evergreen operation. How do the teams change throughout the life cycle for maybe both the external studio as well as on the publishing side?
Yeah, I think there are a couple of vectors where these teams really change and grow over time. I think one vector is really the core composition. When we're looking at a new project and really getting the foundations of a project together, there are a couple of key roles that we're pretty obsessive about filling, right? And that's the creative lead for the project, the technical lead for the project, your product lead, and your production lead. Basically, what we want to put together in the very, very early days is, one, which I think probably resonates in almost any game-making model. It's like, find the fun, what's the core concept, what's the thing that's going to make this really resonate with players. But in parallel, it's setting up the bones, the foundation, the kind of technical stack, technical architecture that allows you to answer the question of, if I'm still operating this game 10 years from now, what does that look like? What investments do I have to make up front from a tooling perspective, from a pipeline perspective, in order to make this work? Because we're not making products that are going to ship and then fade off into the sunset after a year or two.
Sure.
The other, I think, really kind of important thing is your access to data during different parts of this development process and what that means for your team composition. So when we're early in a project, you don't have access to perfect information about your players. You're relying much more on private beta tests or consumer research or these other things. And I think it's really important to have a core team that has experience in the area that you're going after, has the ability to kind of navigate imperfect information and make the right judgment calls to get you to the place where you can test and iterate. As we get closer to launch, we go into soft launch, and particularly once we start live operating, that's where we tend to inject much more of the analytical team, the product team, live operations team. And really that becomes the training ground for anyone who's new to gaming, new to the ecosystem, to be in an environment where they can see data, test their assumptions, get rapid feedback, and much more rapidly kind of develop that understanding of how to operate these games, how to build these games, so that they can be the group of people that can go build the next product when the time comes.
And just think about team size towards the beginning, launch, evergreen, kind of how large are those teams typically on both sides?
Yeah, so with the model at Scopely, our teams are really, I would say, pretty seamless across the development studio and LA headquarters in terms of how they interact. I think of it as one game team, basically one unit that's cohesively trying to build this amazing game experience.
Okay.
So if there's a product person,
so the studio would also be involved in the live ops?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So we generally have the majority of the folks focused on product management, analytics, live operations at Scopely. But if you're not working very intimately and kind of hand in hand in coordination, you're going to be missing out on opportunity for the project. But so that's a key part of it. I would say we tend to start very small, as lean as we can, with just that core group and enough kind of art and development muscle to find the fun rapidly and start kind of setting up the architecture for the game. But then over time, we really scale up based on what we see as the opportunity of the project, which is a little different than kind of locking the scale of your game to the, I would say, current run rate of your game, right? Like, I think there are situations where the natural instinct is, game's making this much revenue, we need to control OpEx, we're going to scale down the team. For us, it's really, what's the team's ability to execute? Are they able to move metrics in a positive direction? Where do they believe they can take this business over the next 12 months, 24 months, even 3+ years, and then investing for that future growth? Because again, if you're looking at this mindset of, this is a game that's going to be around for 5 or 10 years, I think it takes some of that immediate pressure, that immediate kind of focus on today's revenue off of the table.
Okay. Other studios kill a lot of games early on. I guess if you have a key IP around it and if you're passionate about the IP, I assume you don't kill as many ideas. Maybe you do, but as you go towards a launch, what are kind of the key KPIs you look at? We say we really want to hit this kind of retention rate or that kind of ARPDAU, or what are the key metrics you look at, and what specific numbers are kind of for different segments of interest?
Yeah, I would say at a very simplistic level, we are obsessed with audience, right?
Right.
We're obsessed with finding an audience, maintaining an audience, growing an audience over time, and everything tends to waterfall from that, including the KPIs we look at, how we think about killing games or not. And just an example, kind of tying it back to this IP conversation. One of the things that we love about the IPs that we work with, finding these evergreen brands, is that we know up front there's going to be an audience for the game, assuming we deliver on the expectations of those fans. And that's why we, I think, tend to kill less products than some other studios, because we know as long as we iterate to find what that audience actually wants to engage with, then we have access to this huge group of possible players. Then it's completely on us to really focus on how do we retain them, how do we engage them, how do we give them a surprising, delightful experience day after day. That all waterfalls down to really focusing first on retention metrics. So we look very closely, obviously, at the top of the funnel retention metrics, day 1 through 30 retention, all the things that are probably relatively standard, but really focus quite quickly in looking at how do we understand if a player is going to stick around for the long term and is building really healthy habits to come back day after day for multiple years. So we'll look at many more weekly retention-oriented metrics, looking at how many days a week are they engaging with the game, how many sessions are they playing over the span of that week, and really what are the things that are bringing them back into the game experience. Because if we feel like if we can nail that core element of this, of making the game compelling for a mature player day after day after day, monetization, the rest of the kind of core metrics that make the business will waterfall from that.
Cool. And I guess Zynga called it their bold beats, kind of, what are the mechanisms they're implementing to have people come back for 5 years or more? What, from your perspective, has been the most successful one? Is it events around the game, or what do you think works best?
Yeah, I think from my perspective, there have been 2 main beats that have really resonated for us. One is when we evolve the game experience in a way that actually makes it more fun, more enjoyable to play more versus playing less. Again, it's a relatively simplistic concept,
right?
But being able to wrap new features into the game that actually meaningfully advance gameplay and hit these kind of big beats on roughly a quarterly basis for most of our franchises, that's been one important part of the strategy. So basically making sure that this game experience is going to evolve and grow and the meta is going to get deeper over time. In parallel with this idea of really live operating the game as a service, right? So the mandate that I try to put to our live ops teams is, why as a player do I need to come back today?
Right.
Every day, right? What is going to surprise me when I open the game today? What's going to be different today? And what's going to be a meaningful new experience for me today? So we put just a ton of investment into building the tool set that allows us to do that, allows us to basically run whatever event we want to run in the game, release whatever content we want in the game without having to do additional engineering work. Basically, if there's a creator, someone that is designing this event, this experience for players, they can push it out into the game and have it there almost in real time for our players.
Very cool. For Scopely, what's the outlook for 2019? Do you think you're going to be able to maintain your growth momentum? I think you grew 80% in 2018. And what should we expect?
Yeah, this is a really exciting year for us. We had these 2 new game launches towards the end of 2018. I think we expect a good amount of growth from those new games over the course of 2019. We have a lot of conviction that our core game businesses, the ones that have been in market for longer, are also poised for growth. And then we have a couple of new products that are also gearing up for launch.
How many titles do you expect to launch this year?
So the way that we look at launching new titles is we set KPI targets. We have very kind of strict guidelines in terms of what we expect from a retention perspective, from a monetization perspective, from an ability to reach an audience perspective, and we launch when they're ready. So I would say we have multiple games in development. Mm-hmm. We are happy to launch as many of them as are ready. Okay. I think we're definitely on we're definitely close on 1+ of those, but
Okay.
you know, we'll see if the KPIs show up, and when they show up, then we launch.
All right, sounds great. Wish you good luck, and hope you're going to have an amazing year again.
Great, thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Jori.